Please turn to page 87 of the instruction booklet.
Yep, I'm all ready. I got my coffee here. Apologies if you hear it. I'll try and not, drinking noises. But
yeah, no, that's fine. I've got my my Pepsi and my Camelback with me. So, all right. Nice. So welcome to the first episode or 0 episode early access of the instruction booklet, a game where we occasionally talk about video game history. I am your Chat GPT created host, Jeremy, and I am joined by my co-host, a man who believes that the best way to eat ramen is hot and boiling with your bare hands. That is Pons. What's up, Pons?
That is true. My hands are still recovering. Just got them all bandaged up right here. But hi, I am a slightly less Chat GPT developed co-host. My name is Michael. I'm currently actually a PhD in English Literary Studies. And more recently, I've been kind of working on stuff related to video games, playing video games, reading video games, treating video games as literary texts. And so alongside Jeremy here, I've been interested in just looking into video game history and just thinking about the development of the medium and kind of all the weird things that have happened along the way.
Yeah, that's kind of like how this project kind of started was I'm on, so obviously, as y'all know, I'm on, for those folks that are listening on like the channel or whatever, I'm on Cajun Greatness, and this kind of spawned into I wanted to do something fun, and I've been talking with Michael here about like video game stuff, and as someone who has been playing games since as early as I can remember, from everything from the NES to even playing some Commodore games and Atari games up to today's standards, I've got a lot of experience playing games, and I find a lot of video game history interesting. So that's kind of where we approach this from. So yeah, that's why you should, definitely be listening to it if you do. This is an early access episode. So if we don't get enough money, we'll just go to like the Cayman Islands or something. And
I'll say too, just as far as, perspectives are concerned, as video game players, it's interesting for me because I'm younger than I think you are, and younger than perhaps a lot of people who will have direct memories of like a lot of the retro video game consoles and stuff like that. Like I think my first console growing up was actually the Nintendo 64.
Oh wow!
Though I did have, an original Game Boy, I did have a Game Boy Color, but it's because a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about and or older stuff like pre 2000 ish is stuff that I've kind of learned secondhand, either from watching YouTube videos or doing scholarly research. So it is interesting, kind of approaching it from this perspective of I haven't played it, but I've played video games and I've read about this thing,
Right. And I've done a lot of like reading, and also like I do a lot of, I read a lot of books and stuff like that on video game history. There's like a fun series that I read called like boss fight books that talk about like developments that are really fun, and then just the overall like scope of how games started, which is hopefully what we're going to try and cover. I guess the kind of the projected plan of how the show's going to go is every like episode we're going to do like 1 of 2 episodes. We'll either have an episode where we actually legitimately talk about like history. Our plan is to start from the beginnings and like the 40s of like the development of like the rotoscopes and moving forward to up to now. And then we might do some genres, but we're going to do it like every other episode. And then we're going to have episodes where we just kind of talk about random topics, kind of like this episode will be, because we don't want to go crazy, and reading a lot of stuff takes a lot of time. So like with April approaching, we're going to do our episode today. Episode 0 is about Easter eggs, as Easter eggs coming. So yeah, like video game Easter eggs and how that they were introduced and where they started, and some of our favorites, as well as just some wacky and weird ones along the way. So I guess the best way to talk about it is, well, what is an Easter egg? So I guess, Michael, you've done a lot more research into Easter eggs recently than I have. So what would be a good definition of what is an Easter egg?
That's a good question. It's probably a definition I should have offhand. I think in my reading, something that I would propose is kind of just like a generic definition of an Easter egg, is a thing hidden in a game, intentionally hidden in a game by a developer, that is only accessed through kind of like an obscure series of actions, something that has to be tangential to the main story of the game, right? Yeah. An Easter egg can't be part of the main thing. You have to actually kind of go out of your way and recognize patterns, or do a series of things that seems, pointless at first in order to find some secret that is not connected to the main story, usually.
Right.
Though I'm sure, right, people listening are probably already thinking of a counterexample that disproves the rule. Though I think generally this is something that will kind of work as an explanation of what an Easter egg is.
Yeah, something is in the game that the developer intentionally put. I guess a good example that I use, because on my Facebook I asked people to give me examples of Easter eggs, and I had to define it for somebody, is something that's hidden that can be found within inside the game, or something that's like kind of like not a part of the main game is like a good idea as like an Easter egg. Mm-hmm. And so obviously this brings us to, the first time the term was used, the fun hot button topic that you like is, coined in the 70s, late 70s, by the director of software development of Atari to describe the hidden message in Atari's video game Adventure, which I'm sure a ton of people know about, because I'm sure a lot of people either read and or watch the movie Ready Player One. But as time has gone on, and as you've told me plenty of times, it seems as though that might not be the first Easter egg. It might just be the first instance of the word used, correct?
Yeah, I think it would be more correct to say in retrospect that Warren Robinette's Easter egg in Adventure is the first, discovered by players. The first ever discovered Easter egg. The first Easter egg actually described as an Easter egg. Mm-hmm. But I think, and per this kind of theme of video game history, something that I'll say just kind of briefly is that you would think, with how young video games are, relatively speaking, the first video game probably is somewhere in the 60s, maybe the 50s, but yeah, you would think that we would be better at having recorded these things over the past couple of decades. The fact of the matter is that it's actually much more complicated, and you have a lot of early history things kind of coming out of fan publications, magazines, enthusiasts in the genre, not necessarily
right, because
and so
someone doesn't have time to actually like sit down and just hop on every Atari game and dig around for an Easter egg.
Someone who's not interested in contesting, major claims, right?
Right.
And so when Warren Robinette for 25 years is heralded as the man who invented the Easter egg, not too many people are interested in saying, actually, maybe there was someone before him who did it first. They just say, okay, Warren Robinette made the first Easter egg Adventure, 1979.
Right.
And that gets sort of culturally just kind of repeated, right? You end up with Ready Player One, which is very recent.
The last few years.
Yeah. And that book repeats this idea that the Easter egg is an invention of Warren Robinette. I mean, if you just go on YouTube even and you type in first video game Easter egg, I mean,
it's probably like a top hit or something that's up there.
Well, if you know, like 6 years ago, from the Great Big Story YouTube channel, the first gaming Easter egg, it's a video with 1.3 million views from 6 years ago, and I watched it yesterday, and it's about adventure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, and so one of the crazy things, right, and this is kind of, I guess, where all the buildup is leading, is that if you didn't know, there are tons of Easter eggs in video games from before 1979.
Yeah, I think I've even got written in our show notes about like Moonlander having a McDonald's, and it's 1973 or...
Yeah, I'm not quite sure when that one was discovered, but I think that's the earliest that we know of. It's this old game Moonlander, where if you go far enough right and you just keep panning screen after screen, eventually you'll actually find a McDonald's on the moon that you can hilariously crash into and destroy.
Yeah, that's, nothing like taking down a McDonald's.
Yeah. But in 2004, right? So 2004, before Ready Player One, before this aforementioned YouTube video from Great Big Story, 2004, somebody who was revisiting an old video game console, it's kind of a failed console, the Fairchild Channel F video entertainment system, which we'll go back to in a later episode, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
This game called Video Whizball by Bradley Raid Self, from a whole year before Adventure, right? 1978. He had basically done the same thing. He had encoded his name, a signature, a digital signature, you could say, into a hidden room of the game that required a very obscure set of steps in order to reach. But it would be wrong also to say, okay, well, if it's not Robinette, then we just got to find, the real person and then, praise them for being the person who made it. I think Raid Self, in an interview, talked about how he did this because there were rumors of developers over at Atari doing similar things in their own games. And so then you kind of have this problem of, well, was Robinette working on Adventure at the time, and there were rumors about what he was doing that Raid Self heard, and then he just finished his game first. Yeah,
I think it would really have to determine, like development time back then was completely different.
Yeah.
Like, as toward now, like, we hear like studios working on games like for years on end. We don't know how long it took someone to develop, Video Whizball or Adventure on the Atari system, because it was probably all built in like giant computers that, eat up entire rooms. So, there's got to be something there that's like, was this guy working on this at the same time? Did these people know each other, kind of stuff?
Yeah. At the end of the day, I think the quest for the originator of the Easter egg is something that may just be, I don't know, lost due to the accessibility problem of older video games.
Right.
It would be very hard for me. I'm sure I could do it, right? But if I wanted to find a Magnavox Odyssey to go back and play all of those games, it's not something I can't just go to GameStop and buy a Magnavox Odyssey, right?
Right.
And there are a lot of early video game consoles like the Fairchild Channel F Video Entertainment System that had a lot of games that are just not being reproduced and they're not accessible. And so there's always going to be this question of, was there a video game from 72 that was on a defunct arcade box that maybe had an Easter egg that just nobody knows about? It's like, it's a rabbit hole that you're really never going to find the bottom of if you really want to be skeptical about it.
Right.
So I choose to just say, well, this is the history of the Easter egg, and celebrate the fact that it's kind of this weird thing that video games can do. It's cool.
Yeah, like Easter eggs kind of are like, they're fun in the sense that like, it's kind of like the joys that I talk about, like the days that predate, the access to the internet, of like telling your friends about finding this cool thing in a game. Or a good example would be how in, the first issue of Nintendo Power, they just talked about the Konami code, which was just a debug setting that was, it's like word of mouth that kind of spreads like that. And like what you're talking about, like going and finding old systems, we, and hopefully like we'll cover it up too. When you had the crash in the 80s, like there's tons of these like systems and even games themselves that were made for these systems that are just lost to time. Not to mention, how long does those circuit boards last until we can't use them anymore, and these games are kind of there, which that's kind of like the whole idea of like chronicling like video game history, which is like something that we kind of want to do here, is like talk about these things. We're putting them out here for folks to listen to, and somebody out there is gonna hear it and think, hopefully, oh, well, that's kind of cool, and maybe go look into more stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you also get like situations where like, we're talking about like how Ready Player One like got the adventure thing out there, but you also think, what was it? The Ready Player One book was included in like one of the first loot box like things that came out, I think, because that's my roommate at the time had it, and he loaned the book to me. And it's like suddenly you have like this wide spread of like pop culture knowledge where people just default to this thing they find. Mm-hmm. Instead of like where you have these like moonlanders and video whiz balls that are like just kind of out there somewhere. Like I'm sure there's hopefully within the next episodes we'll talk about some of the earlier video games and like the debate over what was really the first video game, and we'll never know if there was an Easter egg in those, because I'm sure either people didn't even think about it or not. So
I think one last thing that I'll kind of say about this is that Robinette's legacy, this is not to say that all of a sudden everyone should be just like, I don't know, hating on the adventure story, right? Obviously the stakes of this discussion are debatable, right? As far as like, no, this person really made the first Easter egg. But a lot of this legacy that Robinette has earned is driven by kind of corporate interests by Atari, which is something that you mentioned as far as the person who coined the Easter egg is concerned.
Right, because this is like the director of software at Atari was like, oh, there's this thing in this game. Like, we need to do something about it. I'm sure Robinette's probably like, oh, okay, cool.
There was a very interesting publication actually in Electronic Games. They had this section basically talking about how, well, I'll just read part of it. Okay. It says, sources at Atari have confirmed one of arcading's most persistent wild stories. If a gamer sends the hero to a certain room in the VCS adventure and performs a specific action, a secret message revealing the designer's name will appear on the screen. Many had scoffed at the notion, citing the fact that Atari doesn't credit designers, but it turns out to be true. Although the programmer in question didn't see fit to let his employer in on the joke, Atari is evidently taking the whole thing with good grace. In fact, it gave Steve Wright an idea for the future. From now on, he told EG in an exclusive interview, we're going to plant little Easter eggs like that in the games. Eventually, we may have a real treasure hunt with the clues hidden in various game cartridges. So what's interesting about that statement, right? And I guess this just raises concerns too about giving proper credit to the developers, like the actual people who work on the games. The reason that Robinette, among others, put his name in the game in the first place was because this was kind of during an era in which video game developers were not properly accredited for the work that they did on video games.
Yeah. They didn't want people knowing either, because they're afraid somebody else might hire them away.
You bought a game like Adventure, and it was an Atari game, right? It wasn't a Warren Robinette game. It was an Atari game. And the article that I sort of pulled this quote from, the guy talks about the most interesting part about that little kind of snippet is that Robinette isn't even named.
Yeah.
Like,
it just
Atari,
said a developer.
Yeah. Atari literally just takes the whole thing and pushes Warren Robinette out of the frame for a second, basically as to say, yeah, Easter eggs are this cool thing that Atari is going to do from now on. You better buy those cartridges and look for those secrets. So, that's, I think, one of the reasons why also people remember this Adventure one so strongly is because Atari really started hyping up this idea of the Easter egg. Like, it really became part of the public discussion and part of their marketing campaign.
Oh yeah, that's an excellent way to sell games. It's like, oh, yeah, we have the game that like has this cool super secret thing hidden in it. It's funny that you think about, like, you talk about like the developers thing. It makes me think about like when I was younger, like playing on the NES and stuff like that, and like beating a game and just having to watch all of the credits of all the people who made it and being like, can we please get through this? And nowadays it's like, no, that was kind of like a novel idea after a while, because developers didn't get the credit for creating these games. So these early Easter eggs were like ways for them to say like, hey, I worked on this game.
Yeah.
You know, and toward now Easter eggs are a little bit more intentional versus, you know, we have this nebulous period in the early days of video games where there could be something that, you know, allowed a developer to, you know, kind of put their brand or their mark on the game to help like signify that, hey, I worked on it. Even, you know, they may not get actual recognition for it by whoever was publishing it or developing it, because, you know, there's not credits. You know, I can see it from a standpoint of like, you know, people who work on a movie get their name put on like movie credits. Why don't I get my name put on, you know, this? And so, you know, that'll be something for the future to think for as well, as, you know, we dive into a debate of, you know, video games and entertainment, because they're so kind of like tightly intertwined.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to go ahead and just start talking about, I guess, some of our favorite examples of Easter eggs from video games?
Sure. Yeah, it's funny you talked about the Atari article, because when you said the part about the treasure hunt, my brain immediately went to the one that I wrote down, which was the Banjo-Kazooie thing, the stop and swoop. Did you ever play that one or see that one? I
did. I didn't find the Easter egg.
Okay, so, you know, Rareware made Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie. Inside of this N64 game, there are quite literally Easter eggs, like eggs that are hidden in the game, and you collect all 5 eggs, and I think it was all 5 eggs. There was a key, a frozen key you have to collect. And yeah, so there was a cyan, a pink, a blue, a green, and a red, and a yellow mystery egg, and there was a ice key that you had to collect. So originally, Rare's intention was to place these in the game, and for when they made their eventual sequel to Banjo-Kazooie, you would literally take the game cartridge out and then put Banjo-Tooie cartridge in while the console was still on for it to unlock some kind of secret hidden thing. And of course, that never panned out because the limitations of the N64 at the time. But they did eventually pay it off to where you could find the key, and the extra missing eggs that were not in first Banjo-Kazooie to get to like an extra like secret area of the game. So it's like, it's interesting that you talk about like Atari's being like, oh, there's a treasure hunt, and it's like, oh, well, you know, I wonder if Rare like saw that and was like, oh, this would be kind of a, you know, an interesting idea. So
yeah, that is a crazy idea. I mean, it's almost like an early attempt at doing, you know, the thing that RPG trilogies do, where it's like, oh, you can upload your save data from the earlier game and it'll affect, you know, like a Mass Effect or a Witcher. You know, this idea that you have to have both games in order to get access to things in the later games that you might not be able to without the first one, which is interesting.
Rare's always been doing like kind of really neat and weird things inside like Easter eggs when they were in their when they're like in their early days. Like the other thing that you know, another one that they've done was the Donkey Kong Country 2 thing. Was there was this big haul of video game stuff, and it had like if it determined like how many number of DK coins you could collect throughout the game, and it had Mario, Link, and I can't remember who the third person was. Let's see. Oh, Yoshi. And so, but that wasn't like the fun. Like everybody's like, oh yeah, a bunch of Nintendo characters. But the fun little like pokey Easter eggy thing that I loved about it is there's a trash can sitting on the floor that says like, I think it's no hoppers, and it's got Sonic shoes laying next to it. So, you know, and this was like Rare kind of like poking at the whole console wars thing. And not to mention Earthworm Jim's gun was laying there as well. So it's like, it was almost like Rare was kind of insulting Sega at the time.
Wow, nice.
So, you know, it's like fun Easter eggs kind of like that. They're like, you know, and Rare always was really tongue in cheek because, I mean, Conker's Bad Fur Day is littered with stuff. It was mostly like pop culture references and stuff like that. So, but is there any of them that you think of that you like, really stand out to you that you enjoyed?
The one that comes to mind most readily right now, and maybe this is an example that's already going to stress test the definition that I provided earlier, but I'm sure maybe you have, I certainly have, many others probably have been keeping up with The Last of Us on HBO. It just finished its first season.
Yeah, I've heard great things. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. It is my goal to eventually play the game first and then watch the show.
Okay. Yeah. I won't say anything, I guess, spoiler related as far as the story is concerned.
Yeah.
But there is a particular moment that fans of the game and the show will remember, where they come to a baseball field. It's the moment where they encounter a giraffe in the game. And amusingly, one of the game developers, I think Peter Field was his name. I'm trying to pull up the tweet, but my computer's being slow. Field named the baseball field in the game after his wife.
Okay.
And so in the game, it just says Bethany Claire Field on the scoreboard at this baseball field.
Yeah.
And amusingly enough, this Easter egg, if you want to call it that, makes its way into the TV show. When you get to this part in the TV show, it shows you the baseball field. And, you know, right there, you actually see the sign that says Bethany Clark Field. And I think the developer was very amused by this because it's just like a funny, silly little throwaway thing that he did that somehow ended up being a massive, you know, HBO.
Huge hit. That's like
huge hit.
Getting tons of praise. And random video game Easter egg in actual live television.
Right.
That's a fun little
perhaps that raises, you know, like a question too about, you know, I offered this kind of explanation of an Easter egg as something that you have to go out of your way to find. And in this case, I suppose it isn't. Though it is a reference to something we would call like non-diegetic, right? An in-game reference to something outside of the game in the quote-unquote real world. So
there's
another.
Well, I mean, like even like with the examples that I was talking about, with like Donkey Kong Country, they're blatantly referencing another competitor in a game for no reason whatsoever other than to just be like poking fun at somebody, you know, or like the same thing with like, you know, Conker's Bad Fur Day uses like pop culture references everywhere from you know, The Matrix to Alien to all this other stuff. You know, I think the final boss of the game is the alien from Aliens. Or like the xenomorph. So you have fun little things like that. Early Easter eggs were kind of, I think it's interesting, like how I guess more like our definition of Easter eggs have probably changed as the years have gone on. Because like, you know, like some of the other ones that I have like are like, you know, the I am error joke from Zelda 2. There's like a random person in a town who their name is quite literally Error, and when you speak to them, they say I am Error, but they're actually a part of the whole quest line, and they have a twin that is the same sprite model who is supposed to be like, it's spelled differently, but the original intention was it to be like Error and Bug, but they didn't when it translated over to when the English translation happened, they left Bug as the actual name that it was written as in Japanese, which is like Bagu or something, which means like, it means software bug. So this was more like an inside joke between the two, like the developer saying like, I made this thing called Error and Bug in the game, and they're actually a part of like a quest line where like someone tells you to go talk to this character. So, you know, sometimes you can have like little weird things like that, or like in A Link to the Past, you had the Chris Hooligan Room, which was like a contest that Nintendo ran. And the person that won it, they named a room for them. Well, unfortunately, like how the game worked was this room was created as like a failsafe for a state that if the game kind of like crash, or like if it couldn't find a room, it would create this room, and this person's name would be in it. I can't remember exactly like what it, but it was like a secret room, and it was done for like someone who won a competition in Nintendo Power. Like Nintendo just put their name in this game, but you had to like, there's like a secret way to find it.
Yeah, you had to break the game to find it.
Yeah, you almost have to like break the game to discover the story. But it's kind of like I guess would you consider like some of the weird stuff in like did you ever play World of Warcraft?
Yeah, absolutely.
So like some of the weird stuff in original like vanilla World of Warcraft, like the Ironforge airport, or
yeah,
there was a war room, I think, in Ogrimmar. There's the village of dancing trolls that like, these were like set pieces that were there when you would fly that were never intentionally originally meant to get to, and people would find like gaps in the walls to discover them, or like old Mount Hyjal, or like dev rooms.
Yeah. And then, you know, when Cataclysm came around and people got flying mounts and,
Yeah.
you know, Overworld Azeroth, they actually had to do something with these places and make them, you know, fully rendered and interactable.
Yeah. So that's like kind of a weird area that like you think about like with like some Easter egg kind of stuff. Is like sometimes it may not be stuff that's developer intentional. It's just like things that the players find that are like weird things, or like something that got left over from early development of the game that they couldn't take out.
Yep. Well, I think that maybe also raises questions about, you know, I mean, you mentioned the Konami code.
Mm-hmm.
My brain immediately went to, you know, when I was younger, and maybe this will, you know, date myself a little bit, but I remember playing Oblivion, I think, when I was in middle school, and discovering the dev console.
Yeah.
And like, you know, just immediately going on the internet to find what all of the cool, you know, things I could do with the dev console were. And I don't know if you ever did this, but there's a Bethesda, they like to put test halls in their video games.
Yeah.
You can type in like COC test hall or something like that in Oblivion. I don't remember the specific code, but it takes you to a developer only area that, you know, allows you to do things like spawn items in, spawn enemies in. Very interestingly, in the Oblivion test hall, you can go into a door that actually takes you to a small village in which you can go into a building and you can find a character who is actually voiced by, oh my gosh, what's his name?
Was it Patrick Stewart was in Oblivion?
No, gosh, the developer, the lead developer for Bethesda.
Oh,
what's his name?
Gosh,
It just works, guys.
Oh, our editor's gonna kick our butts because he's a huge like Elder Scrolls fan.
Todd Howard.
Okay.
Your brain kept wanting to say Todd McFarlane because I was talking to somebody about Spawn.
Oh god.
No, Todd Howard. And it's just so funny because like I had no idea as a kid that this was Todd Howard, and he's like sitting there mimicking all of the different emotions. Like he's saying like, now I'm angry. This is how an angry character is supposed to sound. Like giving cues to the voice actors.
Well, that's kind of cool.
And it's just so weird. I mean, it's like this bizarre little thing that you can find. And it's like, again, is that an Easter egg? Probably not. But it's like, it's a cool, funny thing. I mean, Bethesda, I don't know, you know, how much they cared about how easily accessible their dev console is. I mean, on PC, you literally just press one button and it comes up.
Yeah, well, that's like staying with Elder Scrolls. It's like the one Easter egg that I got from somebody. One of the Easter eggs that I got from somebody was the Elder Scrolls one, the Makek, the liar, the Khajiit.
Yep.
Yeah, how he's apparently in every single one of them, and he's always telling like truths about the game.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, he even made his way into the Elder Scrolls Online now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was I read a lot about him. I even watched like a lot of the videos where he's talking, and you know, it's standard Khajiit stuff, but you know, showed up in Morrowind and then worked his way into Oblivion and Skyrim, and now he's actually online. And but he likes to share opinions about a variety of things, but generally it's stuff that's true, like truths about the world.
Yeah.
So you know, that's like a fun little Easter egg. I guess the other big, is it an Easter egg or is it not, that we can talk about would be anything involving Metal Gear Solid. I like how I just wrote, like, probably just talk about Kojima in our notes because he does some of the weirdest shit in his games.
Yeah. And in other games that are not his own.
Yeah. From, like, you know, even though it's not an Easter egg, but, like, you know, the Psycho Mantis fight being him reading your memory card and, like, commenting about all these games to, I think Metal Gear Solid 3 had a Ape Escape mini game in it. And there was those games are just, I mean, anything that he touches is usually just straight up silly.
Yeah. Just dripping in self-referential irony. You know, I mean, like, how many times are certain lines repeated? You know, like, you know, kept you waiting, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, Metal Gear, it's just, you know, are those Easter eggs? I don't know. Can you be a reference? Can you have a self-referencing Easter egg?
Yeah. Can you reference yourself in a game to other games? And, like, you know, like, he's, you know, like, I think you wrote, like, he's even in Cyberpunk. Like, he's
in Cyberpunk. Yeah, you can find him in that hotel during that the heist with Jackie early on in the game. He's just hanging out in one of the bars.
I was like, oh, look, and he's like, eventually we're gonna have to have a whole episode just about him because the man is very interesting and weird. But, like, you know, and what's even crazier is, like, you know, we live in the era now where, like, remakes and remasters are becoming a thing. Like, do some companies just, like, keep those Easter eggs when you're remaking them, you know? And, like, a good point that I was writing out the stuff and I was like, you know, Blue Point Games has knocked it out of the park twice they've done Shadow of the Colossus and they did the Demon Souls remake. And in both of those games, they added stuff to those games that were hidden secrets and Easter eggs that were to make, like, Blue Point's, like, thing. I think there's, like, a door in Demon Souls that you can never open.
Yeah, I think so. And I think in the remake, it gives you the Penetrator's armor, if I remember correctly.
And then I can't remember what it was for Shadow of the Colossus.
There's a bunch of items that you have to collect, like little, I think, small, like, glowing orbs or gems that kind of show up throughout the world. And if you find all of them, it takes you to a secret door that you can open.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the Shadow of the Colossus remake specifically in that Easter egg is that it seems to be, I can't say this for certain, right? But I know a lot of people think that Blue Point's addition of that Easter egg to the Shadow of the Colossus remake is in response to the almost decade-long, I think, quest for an Easter egg in the original Shadow of the Colossus that turned out to just not be real. I don't know if you know the story. I've seen a couple of articles about it. I think Eurogamer has one. There's a couple of YouTube videos that I've seen about it. But, you know, Shadow of the Colossus is a game that is, part of its aesthetic is that it's just dripping in mystery.
Right.
You're exploring the ruins of this ancient civilization, and there's not much information that you have. It's very kind of just like, you don't know a lot about the world. All you know is that you're on a quest to save this person and you have to kill these big things. Cool. It is a game that also has a lot of secrets. The biggest of which was there is a hidden garden. The secret garden is what it's called, which is basically a massive area that you can actually access through a very difficult sort of climbing sequence in one of the game's ruined areas. This basically led to people treating it, you know, as many people treat contemporary Souls games. You know, whoever found that crazy, you know, you have to hit the wall 50 times in Elden Ring to get through it. That's probably a bug, but that was the funniest thing ever when I heard the story about it. Anyway, people started thinking, okay, Shadow of the Colossus has secrets. We got to find all of them.
Yeah.
And this resulted, I think, in a very interesting, almost conspiracy theory-like endeavor where people started finding bits and pieces of ruins that had very intentional seeming designs on them.
Uh-huh.
You know, hieroglyphs, geometrical sequences, things that they believed would allow them to open a locked door that actually I think appeared before the game's 11th Colossus.
Okay.
And basically, I think it's on like Reddit forums is where a lot of this happened. A lot of people were actively sort of just like going back and forth with each other, trying to connect the dots. This went on for almost a decade before finally someone was able to actually enter like a hacked version of the game that allowed them to just kind of clip through all the walls and fly around, which ultimately kind of put the whole thing to bed. As far as just like, there is no secret. You all have been wasting 10 years of your life. Connecting dots that you put there, basically, or that you believed were there. And I think some people speculate that Blue Point did this Easter egg as a way of just saying, like, no, wait, come back, everyone. We'll make a remake, and we will actually have one final massive secret that you can find.
Yeah, we'll totally put that room in there.
Yeah, and so this has to be probably like my favorite story of, you know, a not Easter egg, like an Easter egg that wasn't actually an Easter egg.
Yeah, it's interesting because I guess it falls in that category of like how we were talking about, like, you know, before the internet and stuff just gets like widespread everywhere, like people just had to talk about it or like just speculate on everything to make sure that like, oh, did that one thing mean that thing, or is this really a secret, or I
really doubt that without the egging on of people on the internet that somebody would have spent, you know, a decade of their own life just playing Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, just combing the game over. That reminds me a lot of I only knew this because like of the old game FAQs, but one of the first RPGs I really remember playing as a kid was on Super Nintendo. I had Final Fantasy 3, which is, you know, Final Fantasy 6 and all that nonsense. Well, in the final boss fight, if you have a certain sword in your inventory, that's like you get a point where there's like an Esper or a summon that you can choose to make it a summon or a weapon, and you can pick it up. And if you take the sword, and you can upgrade the sword like multiple times, if you throw this like crazy rare unique sword at the final boss, instead of popping up damage, it'll just say too much to count. And I'm just like, how long did it take someone to figure out, like, sitting there playing this game, like, what if I just throw this like ridiculously powerful sword at this final boss? Like, what will it do?
Yeah.
So it's interesting how people discover Easter eggs like that. Like, I guess like that leads like to the other one that like with everybody's favorite reptile from the original Mortal Kombat, and how that you had to do the most absurdly crazy stuff just to get him to just to fight him. You didn't even get to unlock him. Like, it's crazy to me, like how Mortal Kombat like developers did that. And what's even funnier is how far that they've gone with their Easter eggs as a whole. From like, so like apparently while playing Mortal Kombat 1, this random green palette swap ninja would show up with like tons of like little hints, and they were just like really bizarre, and you had to like piece it together. So eventually you had to, while on the pit stage, when a shadow flies in front of the moon, you can't hold block, and you have to get a double flawless victory with a fatality that is not the uppercut into the pit to fight Reptile, who had the powers of both Scorpion and Sub-Zero, and in fact his name title on his title bar just said Scorpion.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you didn't even get to unlock him. That's being bizarre. A character who you don't get to play until Mortal Kombat 2.
I find it so weird that it has to be specifically on the pit. But the fatality that you have to do is decidedly not the one that the stage allows you to do, despite the fact that it's the required stage. That's interesting.
Well, what's even crazier is getting a double flawless victory while not using block in Mortal Kombat. Like, game AI back then was like not fair. And you know, and Mortal Kombat goes on to do like other funny stuff, like in Mortal Kombat 2, in like the forest level, you would see like characters poking out behind trees, and that included like Smoke, Noob Saibot, and then there was a burning guy on like a bridge in the far background who would become the final boss of like Mortal Kombat Armageddon. So it's so funny to me that like Mortal Kombat developers back then would be like, hey, remember that random thing we threw in the background there? Let's make it a character. So it's almost like they were very tongue-in-cheek with some of that stuff. But then, like, you think about some of the other like fun like little Easter eggs. Like for me, like there was the unlocking the cow level in Diablo 2.
Yeah.
Just giant hell bovine walking around saying moo all the time.
Yeah, the cow level is a good one.
Yeah, so it's so funny finding like weird stuff like that.
Something that comes to mind with regard to Mortal Kombat too is just the character of Noob Saibot.
Yeah.
Just being Tobias Boone in reverse. Like the Ed Boon and John Tobias, who created the series, and how he was like an ultimate character that you had to find. I'm not sure what the specific steps were actually, but in Mortal Kombat 3.
Oh yeah,
that's what.
There was so many like crazy things inside Mortal Kombat. I think there was I don't think it might have been 3 that had a hidden mini game in it. One of them had a Mortal Kombat hidden mode inside of it, and it's like I guess that could lead us into like something interesting. It's talking about like how like cheat codes are, like some of them, like a good example for me would think about is like forever, like for the longest time, like so GoldenEye 64 was like a big game, and like you could only unlock all of the like secret things by finishing the level in the fastest time possible. And it took like years, and eventually the cheat codes got revealed for that game, and it was like a huge deal.
Nice.
So it's like, cheat codes were more like developer console stuff, but like sometimes people would figure stuff out like that, and it's reached the point, like even going back to the Konami code, where the Konami code has become like a reference among itself. Like even non-Konami developers would put references to the Konami code and stuff, like even to the point that apparently it has showed up on like Facebook and Google, like putting it in does stuff.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Even Canada's like currency website has the Konami code built into it.
Nice.
So it's like, eventually something that was kind of we kind of left this developer code in has become something that's moved into Easter egg territory.
Yeah. I remember, before I knew it was the Konami code, I remember playing, I think 2 games that come to mind that I remember the code working in were, I think the original Star Wars Battlefront 2. I don't remember what it did though. And the Lord of the Rings Return of the King video game specifically. I think specifically Return of the King. Again, it did something, and I don't remember what. Probably, I think it made your character invincible. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there was one. I need to look it up real quick. I can't remember what it was, but there was a. Yeah. Okay. So in the first Rogue Squadron game, you could unlock a Buick.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was just it was a car that could fly. It was so what does it say? It was it's a unique design. It contained a hidden weaponry, and its interior included detailed images of an indicator and a map, as well as a steering wheel and other dials. And the convertible would perform in planet-side combat as a land speeder. So it was just like, it was so funny because I remember like looking through stuff on like Game Facts and seeing like you can unlock a Buick. It's apparently it was a recurring Easter egg in every Rogue Squadron game. Yeah, it was just it was a 1969 Buick Electra. So that they stuck in the game, and it was designated Rudy's car. So it's so funny that like developers will like reuse a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that is funny.
I guess like it's like thinking about how like FromSoft loves patches.
Yeah, patches manages to show up every game, even as a spider.
You think he's going to show up in like Armored Core?
Yeah, that'd be funny.
Yeah, just Armored Core 6. There's patches just somewhere.
Do you remember this is like a deep memory that I just realized I had as you were talking about like reading in magazines to find out about like the Buick showing up.
Yeah.
There was a long time in which it was rumored that Sonic and Tails were in Super Smash Bros. Melee.
Huh. I don't remember that one.
I don't remember where I saw it, but I distinctly remember when I was younger, I was visiting one of my friends' house, I think, and we were playing Melee, and they pulled out, you know, it wasn't like Game Informer, it was some weird magazine that I don't remember, but it had like a fake picture basically of Sonic and Tails in the game.
Oh, okay.
I remember for like the longest time, you know, like going on the early internet to try and figure out like, how do I unlock these characters? Like, I saw the picture, I want Sonic. You know, and later when Brawl came out and actually had Sonic in it, I was like, oh my gosh, Nintendo was listening.
I just remember the trailer for Snake being in that. I love, like, going back to talking about Metal Gear Solid, is his taunts that you could do, and it would be him on the codec talking to the corporal about like random video game characters. Yeah. So
it's a very good thing that he came back for Ultimate.
Yeah, this is true. Snake's a lot of fun.
One of my favorite things, just, you know, since we're back on Kojima for a second.
Yeah.
This is, again, right? This is something that I'm like, is this an Easter egg? Is this just like, you know, a quick little nod to one of Kojima's own fascinations outside of his games? A bit of a nerdier one, perhaps, but Kojima is a huge reader of a Dutch theorist from the 20th century named Johan Huizinga. Huizinga, and I think I actually have a copy of the book. I'm looking at it right now. He's got this book from 1950, I think, called Homo Ludens, A Study of the Play Element and Culture.
Yeah.
Very important text as far as the study of games is concerned and the relevance of games to human society.
Oh, well, that's
so much so that
kind of cool.
Yeah, it is cool. So much so that a lot of contemporary video game studies people still kind of call back to Huizinga in terms of how he's conceptualizing play. Anyway, if the name Ludens sounds familiar at all, it's because Kojima puts it almost everywhere he can in his games, Death Stranding especially. There is a mask that you can get in game that is called the Ludens mask. Kojima Studios, their mascot is that the astronaut with like the skull face. You may have seen it, like in, you know, launching a game. The name of that astronaut is Ludens. If you go on his website and if you read the mission statement for Kojima Productions, it's full of almost direct quotes from this Huizinga book. And it's so funny for me as somebody who, you know, dabbles a little bit in philosophy and in reading kind of the history of, I don't know, theory from a humanities perspective, that Kojima is actually so well versed in a lot of these things that he's dropping references that somebody like me in particular would see.
Yeah.
There are more overt ones. You know, there are emails in Death Stranding literally talking about, like, you know, Freudian psychoanalysis. But the Huizinga ones tend to be a little bit more obscure. And that's funny for me. I love that Kojima does that. So
yeah, I know, like in the Nier games, there's the names of a lot of philosophers as some of the characters.
Yeah, it's so funny.
Yeah, just the guy. What's the director's name for the Nier games? I can't remember his name. He's such a weird. Is it? That's not. Because Yoshi P is the Final Fantasy 14 guy.
Yeah, Yoko Taro.
Yoko Taro. Yeah, that guy. That guy's so strange.
Yeah.
But yeah, he puts a lot of philosophers' names in his games. So
yeah, it's interesting. I've played Automata.
Yeah, I've played that one.
I haven't really engaged in the literature on it, so I don't know, like, if somebody's actually done kind of a breakdown of whether or not the names of these philosophers are actually, like, it's meant to be kind of commentary on what these characters represent ideologically. But I mean, that would be something that I would be interested to look into and maybe report back on, because that would be fun.
Yeah. All right. We're getting close to our time on here, so we're going to start doing our wrapping up. But
yeah.
So
I'm trying to remember if there was anything else. There's one more thing that I want to say. One more thing.
Yeah, what you got?
Call of Duty, Nazi zombies.
Oh God.
Easter eggs. At what point do they stop being Easter eggs? Because they're always called Easter eggs. You know, I remember playing Black Ops 4 and every single new map coming out and, you know, going straight to YouTube and saying, you know, 9 Easter eggs, step-by-step guide. And
that's funny.
Well, it's just funny because, again, it's like, certainly they started out Easter eggs. You know, you go back to World at War and
right.
things that, you know, clearly they're not the point of the game, right? The point of the game is just to survive as long as you can against the zombies. But around about Black Ops 2, it's almost like playing the zombies it's not about just surviving as long as you can anymore. Actually, the point of playing each map is to do the stories, right? Because actually Nazi zombies got a very, very bizarre story kind of going into Black Ops 2 and 3. It's a good story.
Yeah.
It just stops being an Easter egg at some point, right?
That like sort of reminds me of how Bungie put the skulls in Halo 2.
Yeah.
And then now they've kind of become like so synonymous with the games for like difficulty reasons. Like, at what point does these stop becoming Easter eggs now?
Right. At what point do they become actually just the point of the game as opposed to something that is in excess of the main part of the game, you know?
That'd be something for us to talk about in a future show.
Yeah. Black Ops has a ton of weird, you know, like Mork being in Blops 1.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, all right. So I guess we'll talk a little bit like our plans for this right now. And quite literally, a sticky note on the fridge says we just got to make it to episode 5. If we make it to 5 episodes, we're doing good. We'll move that goalpost as we get there.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we're going to, we'll pending everything goes good, we'll have an episode 1 out. We're going to be every month. Our next episode will actually be about video game history. We're going to talk about, we're going to start in the 40s and talk about some of the early video games. We'll probably get into a little bit of the debate between what was really the first video game. And then we'll alternate. Every other month we'll have like kind of a random episode like this where we're talking about Easter egg. I think our second one will probably fall somewhere like in June, which will kind of be around the release of Street Fighter 6. So we might have a fighting games episode.
I'd love that. That'd be sick.
We can talk about Street Fighter and like its history or like just video games. I don't know. We'll figure it out. We're making it up as we're going along. We're trying to get to episode 5. We know we want to talk about history.
The fighting game community too is just such an interesting microcosm. So many stories, so many things you could say about just random topics in fighting game history. So
yeah. So I guess for real quick, so Michael, what games are you playing right now, or like what kind of games, videos, and literature you're reading?
I have been cripplingly addicted to Vampire Survivors recently.
Yeah, that game's a lot of fun.
You know, it's so much fun, and it's terrible because I got into it expressly because I was like, I want to get a game that I can play for 30 minutes or an hour and I'll feel satisfied by it. And then I end up losing 6 hours of my life to this game.
Yeah.
More recently, you know, I've been playing Marvel Snap.
As have I.
Yeah. And just working on stuff for school. I'm currently in the middle of my prelims process. And so I'm writing a bunch of papers about video games as an object of study, but then also kind of what my methodological approach to studying video games as texts are. And then also I'm currently working on a paper that I intend to present at a conference this Friday on Dungeons and Dragons, actually.
Ooh, that'll be fun.
Which is cool. You know, like I think tabletop gaming unfortunately gets overlooked, I think.
Yeah. By
the gaming community as far as thinking about it in this way. Like I don't see a lot of people theorizing about tabletop games, and that's harder because it's harder to approach them as singular texts in the same way that you would just play a video game.
Yeah, and I think I've got it written for like some of our like roadmap ideas. Is that like at some point we will have an episode where we talk about like D&D's influence on video games.
I've been replaying Colossal Cave Adventure because I need to get to the end.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, cool. Well, yeah, I'm the same. I've been playing a lot of Marvel Snap. I recently, because I got a new graphics card, finally have gone back into playing Cyberpunk 2077. It's just like, oh my god, I can play this game at 60 frames per second. I've been playing
the game.
And I've been playing The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap because Nintendo just put the whole Game Boy collection, and that's the only Zelda game I haven't played. I've been watching a lot of Gaming Historian in preparation for all this, which is a great YouTube channel. And soon, hopefully pending not all of the terrible stuff that's come out about it, the new GDC conferences should be dropping soon.
Oh, yeah.
Even though apparently there's been reports of some misdoings at this year's GDC.
Yeah.
So I was particularly interested in the fact that the development team from Rumbleverse were actually going to present at GDC. So rest in peace, Rumbleverse.
Yeah.
Well, I guess outside of that, we'll do our plugs and then we'll wrap this up. So, Michael, where can the people find you online?
Right now, I'm on Twitter. I think it's at Mackerel Prawns is what my because it's supposed to sound like my name.
Oh, okay.
Handle.
Well, cool.
Literally just the fish, mackerel, and then prawns, the not fish, the other aquatic animal.
Gotcha. It's Michael, my co-host. I'm Jeremy. You can find me on twitch.tv/backwards hero, where sometimes I stream games. Our Blood Bowl season just started, so we might be streaming that or some Demio. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook as PressArtF4. And of course, you can find me on the main host of, as one of the hosts of Caging Greatness, which you can find everywhere. Also, shout out to our editor who helps us out from the shadows. He makes this episode sound great. And then not to mention all of the AYCH stuff that helps us out as well. They're the ones that are hosting the show, and we're very thankful that we hope there's not too many features in this episode. You can find them on AYCH Extra on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. You can find them on Twitter at AYCH Podcast and AYCH Extra. That's extra with no E. And they have an Instagram as AYCH Podcast. So, yeah. Thanks again for giving us your time. Hopefully we make it out of early access. And we'll hopefully make enough money, and so you know that all the bugs will be worked out of the game. We'll be back next month, hopefully for our first history episode where we talk about the early days of video games. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for rambling on, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Yep, y'all have a good night.
Good night.